What Now, America? With Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen. And now, Archbishop Sheen.
Fellow Americans, I had a taxi driver the other day in New York, and he said to me, "I wish you'd come back on television." He said, "I never had much of an education. I never went beyond the third grade. But I pick up a number of passengers who use big words, and so I became educated." From that time on, he used only polysyllables, and always out of context. So as I got out of the cab, he said to me, "I just love to hear you on television. You have such a wonderful voice. It has so much animosity in it." And the subject of today I introduced too with a little narrative. When I was on television before, Mother wrote me and told me that her little boy was constantly under her heels in the kitchen. And she said to him, "Go into the parlor. Turn on television. Listen to Bishop Sheen. He's smart. You'll learn something." He turned on the television set and listened for a few minutes. I had been writing on the board at that particular moment the word sex. He came back to his mother. He says, "He's not so smart. He doesn't know how to spell six." This facet of American life will have to do with the change in our attitude toward wealth. Remember 30 or 40 years ago, Americans were very much bent on accumulating wealth. Hence the heroes in national life were those who gathered considerable money, and speakers at commencement time were always rich men like Charles Schwab and J.P. Morgan and one of the Rockefellers and the like. And the assumption was, see, you can make money too. You can collect it all you wish. Now, that day is past. Wealth is on the defensive. In fact, so much so that wealthy men today go in politics. And sometimes, as is well known of one particular millionaire who spent his money in fostering communism in order to get away from the stigma that attached to wealth. What now is the one thing that America likes to collect? It's not money so much, it's experiences. So today there's a boast, "Oh, I've traveled all over the world. I've been drunk I don't know how many times." It's a great experience. Colleges, haven't you ever taken dope? You don't know what life is. Did you ever try to shoplift? Try to be a bum. We're no longer living in the age of the snob. Begin to live in the age of the slob. It's a great experience. No, that's what we're collecting today, is experiences. And what is the one experience which America collects most? Sex. It's curious. Just suppose that this theater were a great banquet hall. And a vast audience, such as you, the lights are lowered, the orchestra trumpets the announcement of a waiter who carries a great silver platter down to the stage. And when he gets on the stage, everyone is expectant. He takes it off, the cover off. And what is there? A piece of raw beefsteak. And everyone goes mad and applauds. Wouldn't you think there was something wrong with that audience in their attitude toward food? Can there not be, too, an overemphasis on the other? Now, why has sex suddenly become in our American life the great overwhelming experience? In order to understand moods, one has to go back a bit into history. Now let us go back to the Victorian days. In the Victorian days, there was a taboo. Something you were not to talk about. And the great taboo of the Victorian days was sex. Yes, sex. No one mentioned it in polite society. Children were never taught about it. Storks brought the babies. And there was a kind of an extreme reverence for it, such as our day has. But it was a taboo, which was wrong. When you get a taboo in any generation, you get in the next generation, swing over to another extreme. What is the taboo in our day? What do we not want to hear about? Death. Do not speak of it. We cosmeticize the dead. He looks just as if he were living. Funerals are over as quickly as possible. Never mention it at table. And in order to cover up this, we have used sex to hide death. And this overemphasis on it manifests itself in three ways. First of all, what does death do? Well, death reminds us of the fact that we're finite. We're not going to live forever. We're getting older and older. Day to day we rot and rot. And each tick of the clock brings us closer to the grave. And so we do not like a reminder of the fact that we are limited and finite and cabin-cribbed confined. And so what do? We make sex the great infinite. We have to talk about it, romanticize it. Not only do we do that, we make it mental. It's not only in the body, but sometimes it's removed from the body, so that you have to think about it all the time. You can't look at an advertisement without being reminded of it. Hence the importance of pornography. It makes you forget death. Think about it. This is the new infinite. You're never going to die. And the second reason is the death is a reminder of the fact that there's going to be an end, a completion, a gradual deterioration of life. Almost forgot how to spell that. A general decay of life. One becomes weak. That's the great word. As time goes on and as we get weaker, we're reminded of death. So what do? Sex, power, energy, virility. See how strong I am? I've overcome death. And another reason, our modern age has no goal or purpose in life. Life is meaningless. So because there is no goal, no purpose in life, we do not know where we're going, sex makes up for it. The intensity of an experience makes up for the absence of a goal. Just as when we've lost our way, we always drive faster in an auto. So this is what has happened. This stress, abnormal stress on it. Things that you didn't know about it before. Imagine poor human nature after all of these thousands of years. Things you didn't know about it before. And why is it? In order to escape death. We must not think about it. Now I'm going to discuss one particular phase of the sex emphasis, or overemphasis. And that is nudity. There's a growing manifestation of that in our American life. Love of stripping and streaking. And whenever I hear of it, I don't know, it always reminds me of retarded infantilism with diapers. But I'm reminded of the poem Peer Gynt, in which he describes the peeling of an onion. And the poet says, there seems a terrible lot of flakes to get to the core. What a time it takes. Yes, gramercy, it does. One divides and divides, and there's no kernel. It's all on the outside. And he might have ended in a dirty smell. So suppose now we analyze the nudity. And I will give first of all the theology of it, and then I will give the psychology of it. First, the theology of nudity. We go back to a myth. Now, a myth does not mean something unreal, something historical. That's not the meaning of a myth. A myth is something that really happened, but it was an event of such consequence that it applies in every age and every generation. We go back to the myth of the first couple naked but did not know they were naked. Why was that? It is because they were covered with an aura of God's grace. They were in such communion with God that there was a kind of a mystical atmosphere that surrounded them. When they lost that union with God, then they perceived themselves to be naked. Why? Simply because this invisible spiritual clothing was now gone. They'd lost communion with God. What did they do? They made fig leaves to cover up their shame. Shame is exposure. But fig leaves dried. They still had shame. And then it was that God made for them the skins of clothing. What is important in this is, let me make a modern application. Those fig leaves that in the myth were put over the secret parts of man and woman. Do you know where they're put today? Over the face. Doesn't make any difference who you have sex with. Drink the water, forget the glass. Persons do not matter. It's only the experience that counts. Pile up experiences. Now they were driven out of that state of happiness, and an angel with a flaming sword was there. An angel with a flaming sword indicated, first of all, you're not going to get back except by some kind of piercing penance and reparation. And furthermore, it's going to be flaming, inspired by love. Now, what we are trying to do today is to get back into a state of happiness and paradise and Eden without passing through the flaming sword. And it cannot be done. That is the theology of it. Now the psychology of it. There is something innate in human nature which does not tolerate those things that are harmful to us. For example, if I get a speck in the eye, my hand tries to remove it. If I have poison in my stomach, I vomit it. Or else there's an emetic that is given. If glass gets into my system, it'll work itself out. The body just simply will not tolerate those things which are alien to it. The body has antibodies, which is a marvelous thing. And therefore, when we transplant a kidney, the antibodies sometimes will resist it. This is foreign to me. This is not good for me. And the antibodies would throw it off. Cancer? Excise it. Get rid of it. That's the way human nature works. Now, we have not only a body, we've got a conscience. Sometimes we get glass in the conscience. Sometimes we get poison into our hearts. Sometimes we get antibodies into our hearts. There's a brood of vipers inside of us. We're unhappy with all of the things that we've done. And there are the lusts, the dishonesties. There are the traitorous actions, the concupiscences, the fornications, the pride, the selfishness, all these things that are alien to a good human nature. And it's natural for the human nature to get rid of it, throw these things off, denude itself. But our modern world, instead of getting rid of its guilt in its conscience, gets rid of its clothes. Instead of a moral denudation, There is a denudation of clothes. Instead of an ethical purging, there is an epidemic purging. And that's the reason the American conscience, with all of its madness about sex to escape death, feels so very unhappy. And believe me, none of us are going to be happy until we get rid of the glass in the body, the cancer, and the transplant that the antibodies will not assimilate. We will not be happy until we get rid of all of these other things that are gnawing at us. This is what has to be denuded. This is the nudity that makes a man happy. Everyone has it. Looking at my clock, I've got 6.5 minutes. See, I have to time myself and decide what ideas I will omit and what ideas I will develop. Nothing is memorized, but it's been thought over hundreds and hundreds of times. So let me give you some examples of how one comes to a realization of the rottenness that is within. I take the case, or rather the play of Camus. The hero of the play was Jean-Baptiste Clémence. Jean-Baptiste Clémence was a lawyer, a well-respected citizen, head of many civic organizations. He helped old women to cross the street. He was known as a philanthropic gentleman. One day, he has an automobile accident. Someone ran into him. It was not Jean-Baptiste's fault. It was the other man's fault. Then there came, not by his own will, but perforce, a kind of a denuding of what he really was. First of all, he discovered that he was a violent man. He would have choked that other man if he felt that he was strong enough to do it. He didn't know all that violence was inside of him. Then his mistress leaves him. He didn't know he was a man of despair. He thought that he could overcome any experience. He's walking along the Seine, and he sees a young girl jump into the river. Her skirts hold her up for a few moments, and he watches her, and then she sinks beneath the river and dies. He would not help her. He never knew before what a coward he was. He was being denuded, stripped of all his Pharisaism and pride, until he knew that in his heart he was a faker. Or to give you another instance, I was in Paris one night. I went there to preach in one of the Paris churches, and I stayed in a small hotel near the Opera Comique, and there was an Englishman in one of the rooms adjoining playing the piano. I complimented him and asked him if he would like to go to dinner with me. He said, "I've never had dinner with a priest in my life." I said, "We're just like anyone else. You stick me with a pin, I will jump as far as anyone." And so we went to dinner, and he said, "I'm a diamond salesman. I live here in Paris." And he said, "You know, I have never met one good man or one good woman in my life." I thanked him for the compliment. And then he went on. Now he said, "Here's my problem." He said, over there at that table, the coming 11th of February, there was a woman trying to break a lump of sugar in a cup of coffee. She couldn't do it, and I broke it for her. She said, my husband is mean. And I said, all right, come and live with me. Well, he said, I get tired of them all after a year, and the year's about up. So he said, I bundled up all of her clothes this morning, and I left them with the concierge. She left a note. Here's the note. Dear puppy, if you refuse to continue living with me until the 11th of February, I shall commit suicide by throwing myself into the Seine. Now, may I permit her to do this? And I said, no, you may not do evil. The good may come from it, and furthermore, she will not commit suicide. Got to be about midnight. Where are you going? I said, to Montmartre. He said, I was just beginning to think you were all right. Why are you going up to that hellhole? Well, I said, on the hill of Montmartre, there's a great basilica called Sacre-Cœur, and every single night there are 1,000 men in that church. They're good men. They have wives, they're good women, they have sons and daughters. There are good people in the world. Come with me. We arrived shortly after midnight. Man had no faith or morals. And how long will you stay? I said, I intend to stay all night, but I will leave when you want to leave. He made no move to leave. Read Mass as the sun came up over Paris. And as we came down, he said, will you stay in Paris and teach me to be good? He said, this is the first time in my life that I ever knew what a rotten man I was. He was being denuded. So the nudity that we have today on the stage is an escape from the nudity of conscience, where we should reveal ourselves as we really are. And if we would say, naked I await thy love's uplifted stroke, we would then begin to be at peace. And this overemphasis on sex today, mark my word, is going to have its reaction. You are going to see in the United States in the next 20 years, 10 years, a return to the emphasis on death. Thank you. Bye, and God love you.